They didn't come when I collapsed. Not one call, not one visit. 3 days in ICU, and the only notification I got was a tag in a photo, my family, lakeside, laughing, deviled eggs and all. Caption: Family day without the drama. I was the drama, apparently, but when I shut off the money, they exploded. Then came the voicemails, the threats, the fake tears, the legal letters, and the final nail? A new will. I wasn't sick. I was inconvenient, and I was about to become the problem they couldn't silence. The last thing I remember was standing near the whiteboard, holding a marker mid-sentence, about to outline the rollout plan for Q4. My vision tunneled, narrowing like someone had drawn curtains around the room. I blinked hard, tried to clear the static in my ears. A dull, tight sensation crept across my chest. I thought it was stress. It had always been stress. They say your body warns you, and mine had, over and over. The persistent headaches that throbbed behind my eyes like tiny fists. The chest pressure I dismissed as anxiety. The dizziness I laughed off after standing too quickly. I told myself it was normal. I told myself I was just tired. I didn't have time to be anything else. I was always the one with the answers, at work, at home. My phone never stopped buzzing, questions from clients, requests from family. No one ever asked how I was holding up. I didn't expect them to. I was the strong one, the dependable one, the "can you just help me one more time" person. And I wore that like a badge until my legs gave out. I didn't feel the fall. I didn't hear the screams. There was just black. When I opened my eyes again, the world was white and buzzing. Blurred outlines of machines and wires surrounded me. A nurse noticed I was awake and pressed a button. Moments later, a doctor walked in, clipboard in hand, expression tight but calm. "You're in ICU," he said. "You had a cardiac event. It was serious. You were lucky someone acted quickly." He said lucky, but it didn't feel like luck. It felt like failure. There was a tube in my arm and monitors beeping beside me. My mouth was dry. My chest ached. Not just physically, but with a heaviness I couldn't quite name yet. I nodded at everything he said, pretending I understood, pretending I felt anything at all. But then came the words I wasn't ready for. "We reached out to your emergency contacts, your parents, your sisters. No one's responded." I blinked. "No one?" He shook his head gently. "We've left multiple messages. Sometimes people get overwhelmed. Maybe they're planning to come later." I turned my face away, tried to look out the window, but the curtain was drawn. My throat tightened. I wanted to say it didn't matter, that I understood. But something cracked inside me right then. The kind of silent crack that doesn't echo, doesn't break anything visible, but shifts everything within. 3 days. That's how long I'd be there, drifting in and out of consciousness, nurses tending to me, machines humming, lights too bright. And no one came, not even a text, not even a call, just that crushing quiet. I tried to distract myself with news on the wall-mounted TV, but nothing stuck. I watched the door, more than the screen, expecting movement, waiting for a familiar face to appear. But it never did. And then, when I was alone again, just the night nurse in the hallway and the drip of IV beside me, it happened. A tear slipped out, traitorous and unwanted. I bit the inside of my cheek, hard, to stop the rest from following. But one was enough. It wasn't just about the loneliness. It was the clarity, the realization that if I had died there, if I'd taken my last breath in that sterile white room, it would have happened without them even noticing. That thought hurt more than the wires in my veins. On the third morning, I woke to the sound of a cleaning cart rolling past my door. The nurse smiled as she adjusted my IV, her hands gentle and practiced. I asked again, though I already knew the answer. Any visitors? She hesitated for half a second before shaking her head. Still no one, Ms. Bennett. But I'll check with the front desk again, okay? I nodded, forcing a smile. It felt brittle. My lips were dry from all the oxygen, my skin pale and dull. I looked nothing like the version of myself I kept curated online or in the boardroom. Strong, polished, in control. Here I was just a patient number attached to beeping machines and unanswered calls. After she left, I reached for my phone. The screen lit up, a quiet echo in the otherwise still room. No missed calls, no voicemails, just one notification. I opened Instagram without thinking, and that's when I saw it. I'd been tagged. It was a picture, Cassie, my youngest sister, wearing oversized sunglasses and a breezy floral dress. Emily was beside her, smiling, holding up a glass of wine. My parents were there too, around the picnic table at our favourite lake spot. The backdrop was a perfect blue sky, the kind they always waited for before scheduling family outings. My mother had made devilled eggs. I could spot them even through the blur of filters. She only made those on special occasions, birthdays, reunions, holidays. And underneath the image, the caption read, "Family Day without the drama ran blessed Orm family first." I stared at it for a full minute, my brain refusing to process. Then it clicked. They were all together, laughing, eating, relaxing. And me? I was 3 days deep into a hospital stay after collapsing at work, alone, without a single visit, not even a text. But Cassie? She had the presence of mind to tag me in a photo of the very gathering they chose not to include me in. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down. It was deliberate. That's what made it worse. It wasn't just that they hadn't come. It was that they had gone out of their way to pretend like I didn't matter. Worse, like I was the cause of the chaos they were so proud of avoiding. Drama. That's what I had been reduced to. Not their daughter, not their sister, just the burden. I didn't cry, not this time. There was no energy left for that. Instead, I felt a strange stillness settle in my chest, like a sheet of frost over water. I could hear the faint echo of children laughing in the hallway. Someone wheeled past my door with a breakfast tray, but all I could see was that image, frozen, smiling, smug. It wasn't just neglect, it was mockery. I thought of all the times I'd shown up, every crisis, every financial shortfall, every late-night phone call. I'd driven 3 hours once when Emily's car broke down during a rainstorm. I'd paid off Cassie's student loan interest just so she could move to New York. I'd helped cover our mum's dental surgery when Dad's insurance fell through. None of it had mattered, not really. Because the second I became inconvenient, the second I needed something, just basic presence, not even support, they vanished. Worse, they celebrated it. I picked the phone back up, thumb hovering over Cassie's post. I didn't comment, I didn't react. I didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing I'd seen it. Instead, I turned off my phone. Silence was better than the noise of betrayal. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, trying to trace the outline of the vent above my bed. My mind flicked through moments, memories all laced now with an undertone I hadn't noticed before, selfishness disguised as closeness, convenience dressed up as connection. They never saw me, not really. They saw what I could provide, what I could fix, who I could rescue. And now, stripped of all that, what was I to them? Dead weight. I swallowed hard, my throat aching with unspoken grief. Not for what I'd lost, but for realizing it had never truly been there in the first place. It's one thing to be forgotten. It's another to be erased while you're still breathing. Lying in that hospital bed, Disconnected from the noise of the world and the people I used to orbit around, my mind wandered backward. Not to memories I wanted, but the ones that had waited patiently to surface. It started with a school project, 5th grade. I'd built a working model of a suspension bridge using toothpicks, string, and sheer determination. My teacher had been so impressed, she'd submitted it to a regional competition. I won 2nd place. I remember running home, clutching the ribbon in my hand like it was gold. Mum looked up from her magazine when I burst into the living room. "That's great, sweetheart. Did you remember to say thank you to your teacher?" That was it. No hug, no fridge display, no phone call to my grandparents. Just a reminder that gratitude mattered more than achievement, and mine wasn't big enough to be celebrated. Cassie, on the other hand, failed 2 classes the following semester. Mum took her out for ice cream to soften the blow. "But failure's part of growing," she'd said, ruffling Cassie's hair. It became a pattern. Emily once reversed into our neighbour's car, lied about it for a week, then cried when she got caught. Dad gave her a long lecture, followed by a quiet deposit into her savings account to help cover the repair. "She's under a lot of pressure," he muttered to me later, as if that made sense. I never crashed a car, never lied, never failed a class, but I also never got ice cream or hush money or heartfelt excuses made on my behalf. I got silence when I succeeded and requests when others failed. By high school, I'd stopped bringing my achievements home, scholarships, awards, leadership roles. I learned to smile politely when my name was called, then tuck the certificates into drawers. Dad only called me into the room when there was a bill to explain or a favour to ask. Mum checked in mostly when she needed a ride somewhere or wanted help choosing a birthday gift for one of my sisters. It wasn't abuse, not in the way people understand it. There were no bruises, no shouting matches, just a slow erosion of significance. I became background noise to a symphony of chaos I never contributed to, but was always expected to quiet. There was one summer, right after I'd graduated college, when I thought maybe it would shift. I was the first in our family to earn a degree. I'd juggled 2 part-time jobs and a full class load, paying for almost everything myself. They didn't throw a party. Instead, they asked if I could help pay for Cassie's freshman dorm deposit. I did. I told myself it was what families did. You pull each other up, fill in the cracks, keep the ship from sinking. But every time I filled one crack, 2 more appeared. And they weren't leaks. I was patching holes they'd carved themselves. Still, I stayed. I answered the calls. I showed up. I paid. Because even invisible people hope to be seen eventually. Looking back, I think that's what hurt the most. Not the imbalance, not even the constant requests. It was the quiet hope that maybe one day they'd acknowledge the weight I carried. That they'd recognise how much easier their lives had been because of me, but they never did. Instead, they started calling me cold, difficult, dramatic, all because I asked questions, because I sometimes said no, because I stopped laughing when Cassie made those sharp, backhanded jokes, because I didn't co-sign Emily's 3rd lease after she broke the last 2. "Why can't you just be supportive?" Mum once asked, after I declined to lend her money for a spa trip. Supportive, as if my entire adulthood hadn't been one long, quiet sacrifice. As I lay in that hospital bed, the IV pump rhythmically clicking beside me, the weight of all those moments settled in like sandbags on my chest. This wasn't new. Their absence wasn't some fresh betrayal. It was the most honest moment they'd ever given me. I just hadn't wanted to see it until now. Some people are left behind suddenly, cut off, thrown out, abandoned. Me? I'd been left behind slowly over years, with smiles and emojis and polite thank yous. I just didn't notice because I was always too busy holding the door open for them, hoping they'd ask me to walk through too. The fourth morning began like the others, quiet, sterile, and painfully bright. I'd learned to expect nothing from the outside world. I didn't even bother checking my messages anymore. But then a nurse came in holding my phone. "It's been buzzing non-stop," she said gently, placing it on the tray beside me. Curious but cautious, I picked it up. 74 missed calls, all from family numbers, Dad's cell, Mum's line, even Emily and Cassie. My heart didn't leap, it tightened. Something was wrong, but not in the way they meant it to be. I opened the latest message from my father. "We need you, urgently, call immediately." No greeting. No, "Are you okay?" No acknowledgement of the 3 days they ignored me. Just urgency. Demand. Like I was a firefighter asleep on duty instead of a daughter recovering from cardiac trauma. My thumb hovered over the call button. For a brief, flickering second, I almost did it. Almost stepped back into the role they'd carved out for me. Julia the fixer, Julia the stable one, Julia the solution. But something inside me resisted. They hadn't shown up when it mattered. And now, when the bank accounts were dry, the bills due, the well running empty, they suddenly remembered I existed. I didn't call them. I called someone else. I scrolled to a name I hadn't pressed in months. Raymond B. I'd never deleted it. My grandfather, my mother's father, the one person they always said had too many opinions. The one they stopped inviting to holiday dinners because he asked too many questions. He answered on the second ring. Which hospital? He asked. No small talk, no questions, just immediate action like he'd been waiting. I told him. He hung up without another word. Exactly 40 minutes later, he walked through the door. Windbreaker zipped halfway up, same weathered satchel slung over his shoulder. His gait was slower than I remembered, but his presence filled the room like armour. He looked at me for half a beat, then sat down beside the bed. "So they finally broke you too, huh?" I didn't answer, didn't have to. He stayed the entire day, asked real questions to my nurses, took notes on a small yellow notepad. Quietly paid for a test my insurance refused to cover. Then he pulled out his tablet and said, "Let's look at your finances." Not, "How much do you owe?" or "What happened?" Just, let's. Like he was in it with me. We went through everything together. He didn't flinch when I revealed how many accounts had my name on them. He didn't sigh or scold when I told him about the utilities, the loans, the auto transfers to my sisters. He just nodded. At one point, he leaned back, arms folded. "They didn't lean on you, Julia. They leaned through you." The words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed, but not in me. He told me something I'd never heard before. Loyalty is only as strong as the people you give it to. You've been loyal to ghosts. He helped me draft a list of every shared account, every automatic payment, every place my name appeared that it shouldn't have. He didn't pressure me to make any decisions. He just said, "It's time to decide what you're keeping and what you're closing." As he stood to leave, he turned to me and said, "You don't owe them silence anymore, but you also don't owe them explanation." For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I felt my lungs filled to capacity. Like I wasn't just surviving the hospital bed, I was waking up inside it. I watched him walk down the hallway, steady, unshaken. And something like hope stirred in my chest. Not hope for reconciliation, not hope that they'd change. Hope that maybe I didn't need them as much as I thought I did. We started with my email. Ray scrolled through the folders like a forensic accountant, his fingers quick despite the slight tremble in his knuckles. He clicked open statements I'd never seen before, bank notifications, loan updates, insurance renewals, things I should have known existed, but somehow didn't. I thought this was just one car loan, I said slowly, pointing at a line item with my name attached to it. Nope, he said, it's two, one refinanced under your name 3 years ago and another one 2 months back. 2? I blinked, but I only drive one car. He gave me a look, not pity, not judgment, just a quiet confirmation that yes, someone else had placed burdens on my back without even asking if I could still stand. Over the next hour, the evidence piled up like snowfall. 2 utility bills, one in Emily's name, but charged through my bank account. 3 credit cards tied to addresses that weren't mine. A medical payment plan opened during one of Mum's dental procedures using my social security number. Twist after twist. It wasn't just that I had helped them financially. It was that I'd been woven into their lives like duct tape, stuck to everything, required to hold it all together, but disposable the second I lost stickiness. There were student loans I never took out, insurance premiums I never approved, a phone line I hadn't used in 5 years but was still billed monthly, connected to a phone number I now recognised as Cassie's work line. It all blurred together until I couldn't tell where their debts ended and mine began. Ray finally sat back, exhaling through his nose. "You know what this is?" he asked. I shook my head. "It's not carelessness," he said. "It's entitlement. This didn't happen by accident." I looked down at the list we'd made, each line item a small betrayal. He was right. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a system, a pattern, a cycle where my compliance was expected and my consent never required. Some of the documents even had forged digital signatures, my name written in a style I'd never use. "That's a federal crime," Ray muttered, leaning in closer. I felt the nausea rise in my throat, not from the discovery, but from how unsurprised I was. That was the real heartbreak. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. "I didn't know it was this bad," I whispered. He gave a small, bitter laugh. "That's how they wanted it." I nodded, still staring at the spreadsheet we'd compiled. 23 entries. 23 separate ways my family had tethered me to their lives without permission. Like roots wrapped around my ankles, dragging me down each time I tried to move forward. I remembered every single moment I'd hesitated before saying no to them, the guilt, the emotional acrobatics I performed to justify their needs above my own. And for what? I wasn't even worth a hospital visit. Wasn't even worth. Ray tapped his pen against the table. "The question is," he said carefully, "what do you want to do next?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that. Not what I could do, not what I should do, but what I wanted. I sat with it for a while, let the weight of that question settle over everything I'd just seen. My instincts screamed to stay quiet, to keep the peace, to protect the fragile illusion of family. But that instinct had nearly killed me. They weren't going to stop, not unless I did. I didn't call, I didn't warn, I didn't explain. The very next morning, I opened my laptop and began cutting the cords, one by one. The first to go was the automatic transfer to Cassie's checking account. Every 2 weeks, without fail, $400 had gone straight to her. "Just until the end of summer?" she'd said 3 summers ago. I cancelled it in under 2 clicks. Next was the joint credit card she'd once begged me to co-sign for when she wanted to build credit responsibly. The current balance, $6,127. I froze the account, flagged it for review, and submitted a statement indicating I'd never authorised charges past the first year. Emily's rent deposit? Gone. The utilities in my name linked to her apartment? Disconnected. I removed my bank card info from every payment platform I recognised, changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication. I even went through Mom's insurance policy, yes, the one I had agreed to help manage, and deleted my name as secondary contact. They would find out soon enough. Let them wonder, let them scramble, let them feel, for one moment, the vacuum I'd spent years filling without thanks. Ray watched me from across the room, quiet but steady, occasionally handing over login details I hadn't remembered. When I hesitated, hovering over a cancellation screen, finger trembling, he didn't push. He just reminded me, gently, "You're not being cruel, you're being clear." The final thing I tackled was the loan. I hadn't even known it existed until Ray flagged a strange activity alert on my credit report. A $22,000 personal loan had been reactivated, apparently refinanced under my name 2 weeks ago. I stared at the screen, breath caught in my chest. The lender was familiar. It was the same one Cassie had once begged me to use when she was rejected for a car lease. "Just for the paperwork," she'd pleaded. "You won't even notice." That was 2 years ago. I'd paid it off in full last spring to protect my credit. And yet, here it was again. My name, my number, my digital signature, except I hadn't signed anything. Ray leaned closer, brows knitting. "That's fraud," he said, "plain and simple." I filed a report immediately, marked the loan as fraudulent, requested a full investigation and credit freeze. I even called the loan office directly. The woman on the phone hesitated when I mentioned the signature. "There's a mismatch in the e-signature pattern," she admitted. "It doesn't align with your previous submissions." That was all I needed to hear. I hung up, heart pounding, not from fear but from fury. Fury not just at the act itself, but at the arrogance it took to do it so casually. To assume I'd be too passive, too loyal, too broken to fight back. They thought I'd never look, they thought I'd never leave. And for a long time, they were right, but not anymore. By the end of that day, I'd severed more than a dozen connections. Financial ties I once believed were obligations. Each click, each confirmation felt like pulling out splinters I hadn't known were festering. And with every cut, I felt lighter. It wasn't easy. I had to sit through phone calls with bank representatives who spoke in code and loops. I had to listen to customer service agents try to talk me out of closures with fake concern and retention offers, but I didn't stop. This wasn't about revenge. It was reclamation. My silence had bought them comfort. My compliance had bought them time. And now that time was up, twist after twist, I unravelled the narrative they'd written for me. I wasn't the dependable sister. I wasn't the selfless daughter. I wasn't the rock holding the family together. I was a resource, a lifeline, a living ATM, and I was done playing that part. The silence didn't last long. Less than 24 hours after I cut the last payment stream, my phone exploded. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages, wave after wave, as if the earth had tilted and spilled them all into my inbox at once. I didn't answer a single one, but I read them. Every last message. Cassie was first, a screenshot of her bank account, 28.34 remaining, no words, just that image, followed by another message 2 minutes later. "What the hell is going on? Fix this." Emily came next, never one to hold back her flair for dramatics. "You're sabotaging everything we've built. Do you even care what this is doing to Mom?" And then a follow-up. "I can't believe you'd stoop this low. You're the one who always said family comes first. Family comes first." I almost laughed. Almost. My mother didn't message right away. That was her thing. Let the daughters speak first, then swoop in with that carefully crafted mix of guilt and grace. But my father, he bypassed all of that. He showed up at my apartment. Ray had warned me. He'd seen Dad's car idling outside when he came by to drop off another stack of legal documents. I peeked through the peephole. There he was, standing stiffly by the door, arms crossed, jaw tight, like a man waiting to reclaim what he believed was his. I didn't open the door. He stood there for over an hour. I heard him pacing, heard his phone vibrate, heard him murmur something through gritted teeth. Then, finally, the sound of footsteps fading down the hall. 10 minutes later, another message came through. You're destroying everything we built. I hope you understand the damage you're causing. It echoed Emily's words almost exactly, like they were reading from the same script. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came 2 days later, when Ray forwarded me an email from a legal contact of his. A quiet, unassuming message from a local attorney's office. Subject line, request for initial consultation, temporary guardianship filing, Julia Bennett. I stared at it, reread it 3 times. They weren't just angry, they weren't just cut off, they were coming for me. Twist 5 had a cruel sharpness to it. While I lay in a hospital room recovering from heart failure, my own family was preparing to legally remove my autonomy. I clicked through the forwarded thread. In the notes, my father was listed as the potential petitioner. Emily and Cassie were noted as supporting parties. The reasoning? Concerns over emotional instability, erratic financial behaviour, and potential cognitive impairment following a medical event. In other words, they were calling me crazy. They weren't just disappointed that I'd cut them off. They weren't just hurt that I'd chosen peace over obligation. They were trying to paint me as unfit, as someone who needed supervision, protection, control. Because control, more than money, had always been the real currency. I sat there, numb, not with sadness, but with a clarity so sharp it felt like glass in my lungs. They were never going to apologize. They were never going to check on me. They were never going to say, "We're sorry we weren't there." Because in their minds, they were there. As long as they had access to my accounts, my name, my labour, they thought we were a family. The second I pulled back, I became a threat, and threats needed to be neutralised. Ray found me still staring at the screen an hour later. He said nothing at first, just placed a hand on my shoulder and sat down beside me. "I saw this before," he said quietly. "When your uncle tried to walk away, they tried the same thing." I turned to him, the weight of history pressing down. "What happened to him?" Ray looked me in the eye. He folded. I didn't waste time. Ray connected me with a lawyer that same afternoon. Her name was Evelyn Cho, mid-40s, sharp eyes, voice like a scalpel. She barely blinked as I explained the guardianship attempt. In fact, she pulled up a pre-filled packet within minutes. "They're hoping to catch you off guard," she said. "We won't let them." We filed an immediate cease and desist, a formal objection to the guardianship petition, attached notarized letters from my doctor, statements confirming I was mentally sound, emotionally stable, and fully capable of managing my affairs. We included documentation of my employment status, my recent promotion, even the HR letter confirming I was voluntarily on medical leave, not forced. Evelyn submitted everything before sunset. The legal fire was lit. But the online fire, that one started without warning. That evening, a message popped up from an old co-worker. "Hey, just checking in. Saw something about you on a live stream. Are you okay?" Confused, I searched the name she'd mentioned. Emily. She was live on Facebook, tears streaming down her cheeks, messy bun barely holding together, mascara smudged just right to signal distress but not collapse. I'm not here to bash anyone, she sniffled, but when someone you love starts to change, when they push everyone away, you have to speak up. Hundreds of viewers were watching. She dabbed her eyes dramatically. My sister has always been strong, but strength can become something darker, isolation, paranoia. She's hurting, and we're just trying to help her. That's all we want, help. I stared at the screen. She never said my name, smart, but she didn't have to. She said oldest sister. She said collapsed at work. She said financial chaos and erratic decisions. And then, as if twisting the knife wasn't enough, she ended with, "We've spoken to professionals. They agree she needs support, even if she doesn't want it." The comments exploded. "Praying for your family. Mental health is so misunderstood. You're so brave to speak out." I felt my stomach drop. It wasn't just a smear. It was a narrative, a carefully curated story. One where I wasn't the abandoned daughter or exploited sibling. I was the ticking time bomb, the danger to myself and others. And they were the saviours. Ray was livid, Evelyn even more so. "They're building a public case to justify a private takeover," she said. "This isn't about concern, it's about control." 2 days later, the twist came. Twist 6. A hospital administrator stopped by my room during morning rounds, unusually tense. She held a tablet in her hands, her fingers curled tight around its edge. "Ms. Bennett," she began carefully, "we've received a flag from the county's Adult Protective Services." I blinked. "A what?" She looked apologetic. "They've issued a preliminary inquiry based on a concern of potential diminished capacity." My chest went cold. She continued. "It's a routine protocol in these cases because you're recovering from a cardiac event and due to the volume of calls we've received referencing your mental state. We're required to notify the state." I stared at her, frozen. "They're saying I'm mentally unfit?" She hesitated. "They're saying you may be. There's no judgment from our side, but we're obligated to report when claims like this are made, especially in writing." Ray stood behind me, fists clenched at his sides. Evelyn was already on the phone. It didn't matter that my vitals were stable, or that my cognition was crystal clear, or that I'd just finished undoing a financial web that should have qualified me for sainthood. They were winning the perception war, not with facts, but with fear. Because what's scarier than a woman in control? A woman who no longer plays her part. Ray showed up at the hospital the next morning with a manila envelope tucked beneath his arm. He didn't say much when he walked in, just nodded to the nurse, pulled the chair up close to my bed, and sat down with a heaviness I hadn't seen in him before. The envelope looked worn, creased at the edges, like it had passed through too many hands. He handed it to me without ceremony. Inside were printouts, screenshots of emails, PDFs of public filings, legal notes with highlighted names. I didn't need to read far. The intent was clear. My family wasn't just testing the waters with guardianship. They were preparing for a full-scale legal assault. Control over my assets, a power of attorney draft, a preliminary guardianship document already pre-filled with my father's name as conservator. Letters of concern from Emily and Cassie, written in language that sounded eerily uniform. I'd bet anything Evelyn would trace it back to a single script. Maybe even the same lawyer who'd quietly tried to file the initial petition. But this time, they weren't just trying to get access to my medical decisions. They were going after everything: bank accounts, property, insurance, retirement, my name. It was an attempted erasure in legal form. I skimmed through one of the concern letters. Cassie wrote that I'd been making uncharacteristically impulsive financial decisions, referencing my recent refusal to support shared family obligations. She actually used the phrase emotional volatility. I set the page down, fingers shaking. "You okay?" Ray asked. "No," I whispered, but I'm not surprised." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back in the chair, his arms folded, face unreadable. Then, after a long silence, he said something that shifted the ground beneath me. "You know," he began, "your father did this before." I looked up. "What?" He nodded slowly. "To my brother. Your great-uncle, Dean." I blinked. The name felt distant, like a forgotten relative, only mentioned in passing. "I thought he just moved out west," I said. "That's what we told people," Ray replied. "But the truth? He tried to cut ties, same way you're doing now. Stopped answering calls, stopped sending money, said he needed space. Your dad didn't like that." My chest tightened. "They tried to have him declared unstable," Ray continued. "Back then it wasn't as easy to file, but they pushed. They sent letters, dragged up past mistakes, even went to his job with concerns about his behaviour. Almost cost him his career." "What happened?" I asked, voice barely audible. He gave in, reconnected, signed over some accounts, said it was easier than fighting. I felt something hot burn behind my eyes. Not tears, something harder, anger. But deeper than that, grief, not just for me, for every person before me who had been pulled under by the same tide. "They don't love us," I said quietly. "They love what we do for them." Ray looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the weight of decades, the scars from stories never told. "They love you," he said, "in the way people love a bridge. Useful, necessary, but the moment it cracks... They look for a new one," I finished. He nodded. For a long time neither of us spoke. The noise of the hospital buzzed softly around us, nurses moving carts, beeping monitors, the distant murmur of a TV left on in another room. But inside my chest something clicked into place. This wasn't personal. It was patterned. It was generational. It was a script passed down like family recipes, how to manipulate, how to guilt, how to gaslight. And for the first time, I saw the full picture. They hadn't just failed to protect me. They had built a system that relied on me not protecting myself. Twist 7 wasn't just about betrayal. It was about legacy. And I was the first one in line who'd decided to break it. That afternoon, I became someone new. Not the fixer, not the forgotten daughter, not the crutch. I became the opponent. Evelyn met me in the hospital lobby with her laptop, legal pads, and a folder so thick it made the receptionist raise her eyebrows. We took over the empty consultation room. I sat in a wheelchair, wires still taped to my arms, but I'd never felt more alert, more ready. We started with the basics, changing every password on every financial account. Banking, retirement, health savings, insurance, two-factor authentication, biometric locks. Evelyn had a contact at the credit bureau, and within an hour she had a full fraud alert placed on my profile. Next came the beneficiaries. I had named my parents years ago, when I didn't know better. Evelyn helped me submit formal documentation to remove them entirely. Every account that held value, monetary or otherwise, was restructured. I appointed Ray as my emergency contact, my healthcare proxy, my power of attorney. The accounts tied to Cassie and Emily were frozen. My name was flagged as at risk for familial fraud. Any attempt to reopen, charge, or alter would trigger an alert to my lawyer and initiate an internal review. I reported the $22,000 loan as identity theft. The process wasn't fast, and it wasn't cheap, but Evelyn was relentless. She'd seen worse, and she believed me. "We're not reacting anymore," she said. "We're protecting." Every click, every form, every notarized letter felt like I was reclaiming bricks from a house that had been stolen and rebuilding it, one wall at a time. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it gave me a language for it. For every "you're overreacting," I now had a contract. For every "you're being difficult," I had a signed affidavit. For every "you owe us," I had a notarized rejection. And then when the paperwork was finally filed and the exhaustion set in, Ray handed me a separate folder. "This one's from me," he said. I opened it, expecting medical records or insurance policies, something boring and bureaucratic. It wasn't. It was a full asset transfer declaration, property, investments, a retirement portfolio, all signed over to me. I blinked. "What is this?" "My legacy," he said, and my answer to a question I asked myself a long time ago. Who deserves it? I shook my head. "Yeah, Ray, I don't..." He held up a hand. "You never asked for anything, Julia, never expected it. That's why you're getting it. You didn't see me as a wallet or a bridge to something else. You saw me as a person. That's rare in this family." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat sharp and sudden. "You don't owe me anything," I said softly. "And yet," he smiled, "here you are. The only one who never needed a reason to show up for people. You did it because it was right, even when they didn't." Twist 8 wasn't dramatic. It wasn't shouted or weaponized. It was quiet, private, and permanent. A recognition of worth, not based on blood, but on character. As Ray packed up the final papers, he added, almost as an afterthought, "I already told the others. I didn't owe them an explanation either." I pictured it. Cassie's shock, Emily's rage, my father's incredulous silence. For the first time, I didn't feel fear at the idea of disappointing them. I felt free. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving in spite of them. I was rising without them. The fallout came faster than I expected. It began quietly, an email here, a phone call there. Then, like a match dropped in dry brush, it ignited. A popular lifestyle blogger reposted a screenshot of Cassie's "Family Day Without the Drama" caption beside Emily's teary live stream. The caption read, "So where was the concern when she was in the hospital?" It went viral within hours. Comment sections turned hostile. People who'd once offered support started digging into Cassie's Instagram travel logs, into Emily's boutique reviews, into every half-truth they'd painted online. The truth unraveled fast. Cassie had used her wellness influencer platform to peddle financial advice while privately siphoning off thousands from a sibling in recovery. Emily's online store, authentic, woman-owned, family first, was exposed for faking product reviews and underpaying a teen intern who later came forward. Screenshots surfaced, receipts were shared, and just like that, their narratives collapsed. Cassie lost 3 brand sponsorships in a week. Emily's boutique was flooded with refund demands. Her PayPal was frozen. A supplier cut ties and posted publicly about it. "We don't work with exploiters." But perhaps the most poetic blow came when a journalist reached out to me directly, not to interview, just to say, "I used to know your sister. None of this surprises me. I'm sorry it happened to you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence was doing more than my words ever could. And still, I didn't post. I didn't rant. I didn't retaliate. I let them spin, let the world see them for who they were. Then Cassie, perhaps realizing the storm wasn't passing, tried to pivot. She posted a video on her channel, stripped of filters, voice soft and trembling. "I want to take a moment to address what's been going on," she began. "Families aren't perfect. We all make mistakes. But I've always believed in forgiveness." She paused, as if summoning sincerity from a script. "My sister is going through something hard. I just hope one day she'll see that we never stopped loving her, that we only wanted what was best." The comments split down the middle. Half applauded her bravery. The other half saw through the performance. "So, love looks like exploiting your sibling's identity to open loans? Funny how she only gets emotional when the money stops. This is not an apology. This is damage control." And through it all, I remained silent. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't revenge. It was peace. Until the letter came, hand-delivered, crisp envelope, expensive paper. The handwriting was my father's. I opened it cautiously, half expecting more legal nonsense. But this wasn't from a lawyer. It was personal, or at least it tried to be. He'd rewritten his will. The letter outlined it in carefully chosen language. In the event of his passing, all remaining assets, though now far less than they'd once been, would go to family members who upheld the unity and values of our household. And then the sentence that sucked the air from the room. "Julia is disinherited until she returns to this family and reconciles." Twist 9. A final ultimatum cloaked in formality, a trap dressed up as legacy. Return, reconcile, submit. Only then would I be allowed back into the fold. Only then would I be considered a daughter again. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so painfully on brand, so surgically aligned with the pattern I'd spent my entire life trying to escape. They still believed they held the prize, still thought I'd be desperate enough to come crawling back for crumbs. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I'd never cared about the prize. I just wanted peace. I didn't burn the letter. I didn't scream or tear it into pieces. I placed it gently back into the envelope, set it on my nightstand, and stared at it for a long moment, like I was giving it one final glance before burying it for good. Then I called Evelyn. She didn't ask why I was calling. I think she already knew. "I want to make it official," I said. "I want to respond." "Clear and final?" she asked. "Permanent," I replied. She prepared the documents in under a day. A notarized legal waiver of any claim to my father's estate. An official disinheritance acknowledgement, signed, witnessed, and filed. Alongside it, we submitted a formal no-contact order for my immediate family, barring them from reaching out through legal, medical, or financial channels. It wasn't vindictive, it was closure. The kind I'd never been allowed to ask for. The kind I was always told would come once things calmed down or when the time was right. But I wasn't waiting anymore, and I wasn't interested in keeping the door cracked for guilt to seep back in. I had sealed it. Evelyn sent a final copy to my father's legal counsel. "Please consider this Julia's irrevocable response to the inheritance clause," she wrote. "She does not wish to be considered in future revisions." That night I slept more deeply than I had in years, not because everything was solved, but because I had finally chosen myself over the story they kept writing for me. In the morning, Ray came by with his usual thermos of coffee and a small white envelope of his own. "You're not the only one with paperwork," he said. I smiled. "What now? You leaving me the cabin?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he handed me the envelope and watched me open it. Inside was a letterhead from the Raymond B. Foundation for Community Health. A non-profit I knew he'd helped fund decades ago, but one I'd never paid much attention to. It had always felt like something distant, something noble and vague, until now. The letter was from the board. They were offering me the role of executive director. I read it twice, then a third time. Ray sat quietly, letting me absorb. They asked me who I trusted to lead when I stepped back, he said simply, and I gave them your name. I blinked. But I don't have a background in non-profit work. You have a background in surviving, in managing people, money, chaos, and more importantly, he added, you've proven something the rest of this family never has. You act with integrity when no one's watching. Twist 10 didn't come with fanfare, it came with stillness, with the sound of my own breath catching in my chest. It wasn't about prestige or titles, it wasn't about power or paychecks, it was about trust. Real, earned trust. I thought back to the little girl who had built a model bridge from toothpicks and string, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice, who spent years holding a family together while being told to stay quiet, be grateful, make room. Now someone was finally saying, you've earned this. Not because of what you gave, but because of who you are. I accepted the offer that afternoon, not because I needed redemption, but because I finally understood. I'd never needed their approval to be whole. Their absence no longer defined me. My presence did. I didn't check social media anymore, not directly. But updates found their way to me like wind sneaking through a crack in a closed window. Friends texted, former co-workers forwarded screenshots. Even Evelyn forwarded a link, flagged with the subject line, "You'll want to document this." The video was slicker this time, professionally shot. Soft music playing beneath a series of slow pans across my childhood home. Cassie, Emily, and my parents stood in front of the porch steps, all dressed in muted colours, head slightly bowed, eyes solemn. At the centre of the shot, a framed photo of me at 8 years old. The caption, "We forgive her, we're still waiting. Family is forever." They didn't tag me this time, but I didn't need a mention to know who it was for. The performance was tailored for a crowd now, followers, sympathisers, sponsors they hadn't lost yet. And perhaps they still hoped for me. I stared at the still frame longer than I expected to. The image of my face, captured decades ago, propped up like a shrine, used as a weapon dressed in nostalgia. It hit harder than I thought it would, not because it worked, but because it almost did. That picture, I remembered that day, my 8th birthday. I'd asked for a book set. Instead, I got a glittery handbag with a note inside. "Time to be more like your sisters." I'd smiled for the camera anyway. Not because I was happy, but because I'd already learned that smiling made everyone more comfortable. Now they were using that same smile to guilt me, to stage their redemption arc, to make it look like they were the ones hurting. And for a moment, just one moment, I felt the breath catch in my throat, tight, like a string pulled taut. But then Evelyn called. Her tone was different this time, flat, tired. "They tried to file in Nevada," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Guardianship. They assumed you'd moved jurisdictions, since Ray's address is listed on the foundation paperwork. We caught it because the petition listed your name but had an outdated medical form attached." Twist 11. They were trying to go around the legal blocks we'd already put in place. Filing under a new state, new narrative, hoping to find a judge who didn't know the history. I leaned back in my chair, the wind knocked out of me. "They're still trying," I whispered. "They always will," Evelyn replied, "until there's nothing left for them to gain." It was manipulative, it was desperate, but more than anything, it was exhausting. They hadn't learned, they hadn't stopped, they just adjusted their tactics. That's when I realised something important, something Evelyn didn't even have to say. This wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the loss of control, the shifting of power. For the first time in decades, I was no longer manageable. I wasn't answering calls. I wasn't bending to demands. I wasn't giving them a storyline they could direct. I was rewriting the script, and they hated it. Ray came into the room moments later with 2 mugs of tea. He didn't ask what the call was about. He just handed me a cup and sat down beside me on the porch swing. For a long while, we didn't speak. Birds chirped in the trees. The wind rustled the tall grass by the fence. Somewhere nearby, a neighbour's dog barked twice, then went silent. It was the kind of peace that didn't announce itself. The kind you had to grow quiet enough to recognise. Eventually, Ray broke the silence. "They'll keep talking," he said. "That's what people like them do." I nodded. "But you don't have to listen." And that, I realised, was the gift. Not the tea, not the porch, not even the position at the foundation. The gift was the permission to let go of the noise, to stop answering doors that led to nowhere, to stop carrying stories I didn't write. We moved in mid-autumn. The air smelled like pine and wet stone. The cabin was modest, just 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, and a small loft overlooking the valley. But it sat on a piece of land that stretched wide and quiet, tucked deep in the mountains where signal bars went to die. Perfect. The property was purchased under the foundation's name, as Ray suggested. That way, no one could trace it easily. Not to me, not to him, just a quiet corner of the world, unreachable by noise, obligation, or expectation. No one knew the address. We didn't post online, didn't forward mail, didn't bring our old lives with us. I deleted every social media account I had, permanently. It was easier than I thought it would be. Erasing the digital version of myself. The one who always smiled just enough, posted just often enough, shared just enough family photos to keep the illusion intact. I realised I hadn't been using those platforms to connect. I'd been using them to perform. Now I didn't need an audience. Mornings were slow. Ray made the first pot of coffee before sunrise, always in silence. I'd sit by the window wrapped in an old flannel blanket, watching the mist slide across the hills like breath on glass. Some days we read, other days we work quietly on foundation business, grant reviews, outreach planning, internal audits. But most days I wrote, longhand, in thick leather-bound notebooks, not for anyone else, just for me, pages filled with fragmented memories, lists of things I'd let go, reflections I didn't even know I'd carried. There was something sacred in the ink, something freeing about seeing the truth take shape in my own handwriting. I wasn't healing. I was already healed. I just hadn't slowed down long enough to notice. Peace didn't come like a wave. It came like breath, like warm tea, like Ray's quiet footsteps creaking across the cabin floor as he placed another stack of firewood beside the stove. I didn't think about my family much, not because I was angry, because I didn't have to. They were no longer the centre of my orbit. They were planets I'd once mistaken for suns, bright, spinning, impossible to escape. Now I saw them clearly for what they were, distant, fading, until the letter came. It arrived 2 weeks into December, hand-addressed, no return label. Ray brought it in from the post office in town, brows raised. I didn't recognise the handwriting, he said, setting it beside my teacup. But I did. I opened it slowly, fingers brushing against the familiar loops and curls. It was from Emily. Not an apology, not a demand, just 6 shaky pages of desperation. She was unravelling. The business had folded. The sponsorships were gone. Cassie had moved out of state, stopped responding. My parents were not doing well, though she didn't explain further. There were debts, threats, lawsuits. She hinted at health problems, emotional breakdowns, unpaid rent. And then on the final page, I don't know where else to turn. Please, I need help. I'm scared. There were no manipulations this time, no guilt trips or veiled insults, just fear, pure and exposed. And for a moment, a flicker, I felt the old reflex kick in. The part of me that once rushed to fix, to rescue, to absorb everyone else's chaos and call it love. But that version of me was gone. I walked outside, the snow beginning to settle in soft blankets across the porch. Ray was splitting firewood nearby, his rhythm steady and strong. I held the letter over the flame of the outdoor fire pit, watched the edges curl, darken, dissolve into heat and ash. No fanfare, no speeches, just release. And as the final corner crumbled into black, I smiled, not out of cruelty. But because I finally understood, I wasn't the broken one. I had simply outgrown the cage they kept trying to lock me in.